She was a 19-year-old peasant girl who had never held a sword. She couldn't read, she couldn't write, and she lived in a world where a woman's voice was meant to be silent. Yet, she convinced a king to give her an army. She shattered the English front lines, and she became the most famous warrior saint in human history. How did a teenage shepherdess lead a nation to victory? This is the breathtaking story of Joan of Arc. It all began in 1412, in the tiny village of Domremy. At just 13 years old, Joan heard a voice in her father's garden. It wasn't a whisper, it was a command. She claimed she saw Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret. Their mission for her was pure madness: drive the English out of France and see the king crowned. For 3 years, she resisted, but the voices grew louder. Finally, she cut her hair, put on men's clothes, and set off on a journey across enemy lines that should have been her certain death. At 17, she reached the royal court. The king, desperate and out of options, gave her armor, a horse, and an army. She marched to the city of Orleans, a city that had been under a brutal siege for months. Joan didn't sit in the back. She was at the very front, waving her white banner, shouting encouragement through the smoke. Even after being shot through the neck with an arrow, she pulled it out with her own hands and returned to the fight. In just 9 days, a teenage girl did what the French army hadn't been able to do in decades. She broke the siege. But the higher you rise, the harder you fall. Captured and sold to the English, Joan was put on trial for her life. They didn't just want her dead, they wanted her legacy destroyed. For months, she stood alone against dozens of the most powerful scholars in Europe. They tried to trap her, but her answers were like steel. When they asked if she was in God's grace, she stared them down and said, "If I am not, may God put me there, and if I am, may God so keep me." On May 30th, 1431, the fire was lit. As the flames rose in the marketplace of Rouen, Joan didn't scream in anger. She shouted one name, over and over, Jesus. The English executioner later wept, saying, "We are lost, for we have burned a saint." Joan of Arc didn't have a crown, and she didn't have a long life. But she had a voice, and the courage to follow it, even into the fire. "I am not afraid," she said. "I was born to do this."